I am the Transition and Pre-Employment Transition Specialist for Vocational Rehabilitation Services. I too want to welcome all of you here today for our meeting with VRS staff and our community partners. We're excited to have all of you here today. I'm just going to go through here our agenda. So we'll have some opening remarks from some of our leadership in a moment here. And then we will be reviewing the professional and technical contract updates. That's helpful for everybody to know, especially related to pre-employment transition services. And then I'll go through a few training items related to Pre-ETS authorizing and invoicing. And then we're going to have time for local discussions. As you all know, you are community partners each chose a team to join for these discussions this afternoon. And we'll have time throughout the training for question and answers as well. We'll make sure we get a break sometime in the middle here as well. So make sure you're not just staring at the computer all afternoon. So with that, I know Dee Torgerson, our director, was not able to join us this afternoon. I believe our first person that will be welcoming everyone is Chris McVeigh, our VRS Director of Strategic Initiatives.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon portion of our Pre-ETS meeting for the metro area. I know we have some folks that are joining also from other parts of the state that weren't able to join at our other Pre-ETS meetings. We're holding these Pre-ETS meetings on a regional basis. So welcome to our community partners that have joined us for the afternoon. I'm really looking forward to opportunities for you to get updated on some key pieces relating to the provision of pre-employment transition services for students throughout all of our school districts. I'm just really excited about what this year is going to bring, despite COVID. Despite all of us living in a very virtual world and the school districts doing the same or having some sort of hybrid, it's definitely going to be a challenge. But I do believe that we're going to make some nice inroads. And one of those pieces is getting more of our community partners that are adding pre-employment transition services to their PT contracts, or developing more capacity to do more of the pre-ETS work. The whole goal is to impact the lives of students with disabilities. You know, I'm just thinking back to each of us has a story to tell about our first jobs and what kind of an impact it's had on us, and how those first starts with, whether it's learning to run a cash register or you know, how you clean out a specific bin. It all leads to preparing us for, no matter what level of requirements a job has, it leads us to a place where we build that skill and ability and understanding when we need to get to work, being on time. So we've talked about that in preparing for pre-employment transition services as a VR agency and having those conversations about recalling our first days with first jobs. But what we have to bring to bear this school year and in future school years are the opportunities to impact the lives of students, not only those that have open cases with VRS, but are potentially eligible for VRS services. And that's thousands of kids. And so I just wanted to set that as a context about, you know, yes, we're gathering here today. There's some really key pieces that both VRS staff and community partners need to be aware of in order to deliver services and get paid for those services and make sure those kids get the supports that they need. We're also building this for beyond COVID. We're building this for years to come. And you know, despite the challenges that we're living in, I'm very hopeful about what we can do and the kind of marks we're going to make in the lives of people with disabilities who set career goals for themselves are far beyond anything they'd ever dreamed of. And so I'm just really, again, thank you all for being here today. I want to introduce Kim Babine, who's the Director of Community Partnerships for DVRS.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Alyssa and Anne. Good afternoon. I'm Kim Babine, Director of Community Partnerships here with Deed, and I am echo what Chris has said, and I wanted to just spend a little bit of time. I know we have VRS staff on the line and community partner staff on the line, and I just want to share how grateful I am to both groups for all the work that it takes to implement new services that haven't been done before in the country, and then haven't, trying to figure out how that works for Minnesota. And so we've been on a journey these last couple of years trying to find the right fit for Pre-ETS for the individuals we serve and how they get those services from providers and from our staff. And it's been a bumpy journey. It hasn't been perfect. We know that, and you've stuck with us. So I'm so grateful for the staff who are continually flexible and interested in trying new things, and especially for our community partner staff, that you are coming along on this journey with us, and you are helping us form these services that, as Chris said, are so important to the people that we serve, so important to students. I get so excited when I think about the individual touch points that you all are making. And we at VRS, we can't do this work without community partners. And so we're just so grateful for all the work that you do. And part of my job is to try and make the mechanism by which community partners provide services, make that easier for both our VRS staff and community partner staff. So when it comes to the PT contracts and invoicing and authorizing an invoice and paying and all those pieces, my ears are always peeled for, well, could we do that in a different way? Could it be streamlined in some way? Could we make it easier on folks? And so that's what I am sharing with you all today. But then it doesn't end there. We know nothing's ever perfect, and so we'll keep that conversation going and be interested to continually be hearing from you about how we can improve how we do this and improve services for people. So thank you. Alyssa, does it go right into my part, or back to you, Alyssa?
I think we go right into the next slide that you were going to take. So if you want to just keep going.
Yeah, I will keep going. Lucky ducks, you. So there are a number of updates that we want to make to Pre-ETS services and Pre-ETS contracts, the way that they're structured with Pre-ETS and how we authorize and invoice for those pieces. So there is an open amendment period right now through tomorrow. So we opened that on July 2nd and had 2 months. You can contact me, you can contact Ann Paulson or Sarah Sundin for help getting that finished up and in by tomorrow. And as you go through it, you'll see the application on our website, and sometimes there are questions, and feel free to just reach out, give one of them a call or an email, same to me, and we'll help you get that application figured out. We do have a number of pieces on the contracts that we'll want to change. So if you currently have Pre-ETS on your contract, you're going to need an amendment, because there's a bunch of things that I'm about to go over right now that we need to restructure on contracts. If you don't have Pre-ETS on your contract right now, we would invite you to consider providing Pre-ETS and add them to your contract this time. And the way we will add them will match the structure, of course, of what we are proposing or what we've decided here. So we're excited that more community partners are adding Pre-ETS to their contracts, and the community of people who are able to provide these services is growing. And so to VRS staff, and it's good for partner staff to know as well, that we send out, my team, community partnerships team, once the contracts are complete, we send an email to all of our VRS staff and say what's new. Hey, this one has a new amendment, this is a brand new contract, or whatever it is. And so those will come out from Ann. The slide says Ann, it might be Sarah as well. And so just keep an eye out for those, and then we will of course be updating our easy sort list with the new contracts, and then the service lookup that our staff has access to. So those will all come once we get them completed. So on the next slide, we go into a few of the specifics that we are changing this year. So we'll go through each one with a little bit more detail. And if you joined us for the Community Partners Forum week or two ago, you've heard some of this, but we're happy that you're here on the call, and we just want to make sure everyone's up to speed. So the first is work experience wages. The way that we set up the ability for community partners to pay the wages of individuals when they are in their work experience was work experience wages. And we set it up at the cost of the wage, because you have to pay that, plus 25% for administrative costs, just the work to be the payroll agent. That includes workers' comp and unemployment insurance and insurance and liability, pieces like that. So we learned that that wasn't enough to cover the cost of your service. And so we are raising that to the wage plus 50%. We think that that is going to work better for providers, and we're excited that that can then hopefully be a piece that gets more students into more work experiences. So all these that I'm going to go through require a change to, most of these require a change to the PT contract. And so if you haven't submitted your application, be sure to get one in. We want to make sure that we update all these contracts with all these pieces. The second is reducing the number of service titles, and I'll go into that in more detail on the next slide, so hold that thought. The next one is the travel differential. So the way that we tried to account for the cost of travel was by putting a travel differential on all those rates that we put in for Pre-ETS. And that's what we had done that some on PT contracts for general services. We had also tried for a long time, had a transportation rate that for general services that providers could use when they were transporting an individual for the purposes of their employment plan. And on July 2nd, VRS announced we made some changes to how we're doing that. So now transportation can be reimbursed for not only costs related to transporting an individual for the purposes of their employment plan, but also for the costs traveling to and from the individual. And so those are, even for Pre-ETS and for general services, those costs can be reimbursed. The way that it's going to work for Pre-ETS is that it's different from general services. So it'll take a little while for everyone to get that straight in our minds, but the reimbursement structure is different. For Pre-ETS, we will reimburse providers for costs related to transportation by adding that transportation time just to the service authorization. So it'll be at $75 an hour. We'll also, when we do that, with these amendments, we will remove the travel differential from your contract. So it is, we're just adding it to the service authorization. So you'll work with the rep and the tech and maybe the counselor that you're working with to determine what that needed travel time is so that the service authorization is big enough to cover that. And that's another important point is you might hear us talk about purchasing violations or MS-16s, Minnesota Statute 16. That is the law that says that we have to have an authorization in place before any service takes place. And so if you are setting up a job exploration counseling service and you also need some travel with that, all of that needs to be discussed with the VRS staff and put into an authorization, and the authorization completed before the service begins, or we will not be able to pay you, because if we do pay you, it's against the law. And so we are, sometimes we've taken those and done that in some situations, but we aren't doing that for the transportation piece. We need to just hold the line on that one there. So just be in good communication with the person you're working with in VR. The next piece are some Pre-ETS flexibilities that we've talked about, the service and services in support of Pre-ETS. So we are adding a couple services, and the piece that we'll talk about in a little bit, we're combining services. So there are fewer, but these ones are still going to be separate. So these two services are only available to individuals students who we're working with, who are eligible for the VR program. It's unfortunately not available to students who are potentially eligible for the VR program. It's just for those eligible students. So services in support of Pre-ETS, the first one is intake fees for Pre-ETS services. So we can now authorize for Pre-ETS intake, and we'll put that on contracts. And if the person is VR eligible, we'll have that be a separate service. If the person is potentially eligible, VRS will continue what we've been doing and still authorize for a first meeting for those potentially eligible students. We also, they heard us that job coaching is really important, and so we don't call it job coaching, it's work-based learning coaching, but they were so happy that the federal funder and our regulator told us that we would be able to add this work-based learning coaching. So we're adding that to contracts, and just keep in mind that the coaches perform similar functions as job coaches do. So assisting students with learning to perform tasks assigned during the work-based learning experiences. So those are the services in support of Pre-ETS and the flexibilities. The next piece that I wanted to go over are the, we've added, we're calling them same or similar general services or corresponding services. So we've got all these beautiful Pre-ETS services that we're really excited about, but what happens when we have a VR eligible student who is no longer considered Pre-ETS anymore? The example I always use is if they have a birthday and they are no longer eligible due to their age. So if they're in the middle of a work-based learning experience, it would be a shame. It would be not good if we had to just cut that off and then they were out of luck. So we are, for students who are VR eligible, we are adding those a corresponding service for every Pre-ETS service to the general service list. And so then you would work with the community partners, and VRS staff would work together to determine how that's going to go and how the transition is going to go. But you would get a new authorization for, you have Pre-ETS work-based learning in this example, and then you would have work-based learning for general services. And so the services could continue. And this is complicated, like it's hard to work out. So when you're working on your application, we tried to do the work for you, but if you have any questions or unsure about how that'll work, give Ann or Sarah a call. Feel free to always reach out to me and we'll work through it together. So that's what those corresponding services are. And then some people have special programming, a training program, a different experience that is a kind of a package. And if you have that special programming for Pre-ETS, we'd like you to, today or tomorrow, reach out to Ann Paulson or Sarah Sundin and have a conversation about what that might look like. We want to be really careful when we put it on contracts so that it's really clear how to authorize for it, because as you all know, Pre-ETS is really picky, and so what we have to do is, if it's special programming, we need to make sure we know what's required services or what services are taking place under that. So if there's a little bit of job exploration counseling and a little bit of workplace readiness training, we need to have 50-50 or whatever the percentage is, so that we can be able to report that to the feds. And we are going to have that laid out on the contract, so it's really easy for both the provider and the VRS staff to authorize for that. So then I'm going to talk about our group rates. So we know that the group rates were, a year ago, they were imperfect. We knew that going in, but we were trying really hard to incentivize group classes. We knew that was a new thing for community partners in the VRS world. You might have done it with other funding or something, but it was new in VRS, so we wanted to incentivize it. We also wanted to make sure that you were making progressively more money as you had more students in the class, but also wanted to be really good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and make sure that we were being really conservative, reasonably conservative with those taxpayer dollars. But it was too complicated. We recognized that it didn't work didn't work. Everyone, too many headaches. And so we're simplifying that. We're going to have a flat group rate at $30 an hour, and that's for 2 students and higher. So that will be adjusted on your contracts as well. All right, Alyssa, let's go to the next slide, and we will talk about simplifying the service titles. All righty, so these are our service types and titles, and you might hear us talk about them. They're a little, sometimes they get into the weeds. It's basically the coding that we use to be able to authorize to you. And it's also, the coding is important because it's how we then report to the federal government what services are being provided. So for job exploration counseling service, nothing's changing there. Same thing with post-secondary education counseling, nothing's changing there. With workplace readiness training, so we are going from 4 titles to 1. So there are 4 services that are going to be going underneath this umbrella of workplace readiness training. So right now you have on your contracts, if you have pre-ETS and counselors, you're used to these service titles. Pre-ETS benefits information services, independent living services or soft skills training, pre-ETS job seeking skills training, and pre-ETS public transportation training. So those 4 are going to be collapsed, and we will be authorizing just for workplace readiness training. So those activities aren't going away. We still want you to do those activities. They are now just an activity instead of a separate code. Instruction and self-advocacy is staying the same. And then the other one that's changing is work-based learning. So we are moving to collapse some of those service titles under a new umbrella that's called Pre-ETS introductory work activities. And the services that will go under that as activities that are shifting are career mentoring experience, informational interview, job shadow, service learning, workplace tour, or field trip. So again, those are still activities we want you to do. We're just going to authorize for that under introductory work activities, and introductory work activities is what will show up on your contract. And then work experience services and work experience wages will still be separate and distinct titles. So I just wanted to make a little plug. This is not on any slide. We talked a little bit about the open amendment period. Again, the due date is tomorrow, end of day tomorrow. And then I know that we are working on getting more providers and more staff to be able to stay up to date with what's happening with contracts and all sorts of things with community partnerships. And so online on our external website, we are archiving all the emails that get sent out from VRS. You can also sign up for emails. If you or some of your staff are not getting those emails, feel free to sign up. And then we've been having forums for community partnerships. We've had 2 now, and those are getting posted as well. And so you can see recordings and agendas and transcripts there, and more information if we have other handouts. So just a little plug for staying up to date with us. And that's it, unless there's anything else, Alyssa, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, one other thing I did want to say is, as Kim was reviewing the service titles, on here there is a link. I'm going to click on it right now, and it will take you to our deed website. And it brings you to this definitions for PT contracts. So everything that Kim reviewed is in this document as well. So it goes through those service categories within pre-ETS and then what's included in each. And I know there was a question about the pre-ETS work-based learning, introductory work activities. It shows you everything that's included in there. So it's career mentorship, informational interview, job shadow, service learning, and the workplace tour field trip. And then there's a second side to it that tells you the other items within work-based learning, as well as services in support of pre-ETS. So again, that's linked on this slide, and then we'll show you where it is on the website too in a second. Okay. Now I gotta figure out how I get back to my PowerPoint. Oh, there it is. Do you see it, Kim? Okay.
Yep, I see it.
Okay. So I'm going to move us along, and I'm also going to watch the time so that we all get a break in a little while, at least partway through here. So we're going to move into Pre-ETS authorizing and invoice guidance for all of you. Again, I know there's a lot of questions related to that in Pre-ETS, so hopefully we'll answer some questions that you have here today. Kim just mentioned, I am going to just take you real quick to the web page. She mentioned staying up to date in terms of information that comes out from VRS that goes out to all of our community partners. So here is the link that you can type in your email address, and if you're not already getting messages that come out from VRS, that's how you can get them, as easy as that. And then if you're in the community partners page, you can go to contracted services. We have this linked on the PowerPoint too, but you'll see this pre-employment transition services page. And when you click there, you'll see we have resources for our providers all in one place. We've got a number of different tabs. So this first tab, PT contract information, gives you some basics about your contract with VRS. The definitions that I just shared with you is listed here. And then we currently have Ann Paulson on here. We should add Sarah Sundin. Don't let me forget that, Kim. So if you have questions about contracts. We also have a number of recorded trainings. So for those of you that we had an opportunity for you to get access to 3 different websites. One was eTrack, which is supported by Midwest Special Services. Shout out to MSS, one of our partners online today. Virtual Job Shadow, and the Minnesota Career Information System. And so we have trainings that have been recorded, and they're all linked on here. And then webinars, which today would be a webinar. We will put a link once we have the recording ready from today's presentation, and any past meetings like this that we've had online will all be there related to Pre-ETS. And then we have a resources tab. One resource I really want to make sure you know about, if you don't already, is this Pre-ETS toolkit. I'm going to open it up real quick. The Pre-ETS toolkit was meant to, if you're new to Pre-ETS and you're just not sure where to begin, or even if you aren't new but you're looking for other resources, that's what this toolkit is meant to provide, is some ideas for how to provide Pre-ETS. And so I'm going to scroll down. The first page just gives you an overview of what Pre-ETS is. And then we have in this table of contents, you'll see it's divided by each of the 5 required Pre-ETS services. So like with job exploration counseling, you'll see we have the definition that's listed, common results that you will see from providing that Pre-ETS service. We have possible activities that can be completed in individual or group settings, as well as resources. So we have that for each of the 5 required Pre-ETS services. And then we also have an appendix with the top 25 Pre-ETS resources. So I get questions about curriculum. So we have a number of different curricula that you could they're all linked here, so you can go there and find, different resources that way. Most of them are free. There are a few that you can pay for, which we have indicated with an asterisk. And then we have other planning tools, other online career information sites, and that's our top 25 resources. And then our Appendix B also gives you some examples of how Pre-ETS can be provided in group settings, as well as individual or one-on-one settings. So it just gives you some ideas. It's not the be-all, end-all, but gives you some good resources if you, again, are not sure where to start. I'm going to click out of that. I'm going to bring us back to the website, however I can find that. I was showing you resources, sorry. So in this resources tab, we also have some sample reports and sample invoices. These were shared at a training that we had in March. And we plan to update and add some more of these examples, and we'll let you know when those are on there. So I think that that's pretty good for now. It gives you at least some basic information of what we have in terms of resources for you on our website. One other thing that, I'm going to go through with you today, some guidance related to authorizing, invoicing, and reporting for Pre-ETS. We have it all pretty much ready to go, all in one guidance document. It'll be about 8 pages, and we're going to get that onto the website, and Kim Babine, I think, will be sending out a message to everybody once that is ready. But just a few last little tweaks to that, and so we'll let you know when that's ready. So everything I'm going to share with you will be in that guide. We also have almost ready to go our mini training modules on Pre-ETS that we will be putting onto that page that I just showed you. And so when those are ready, we'll let you know that as well. And those are really intended for anybody new coming into, you hire on a new staff person and you're asking them to provide Pre-ETS, give them the overview of what Pre-ETS is all about and go into what each of those 5 Pre-ETS services are, as well as some of the other information that we'll be sharing today. Okay. So one thing that we've had some questions about that I wanted to clarify, just to be clear, that VRS provides or arranges Pre-ETS services to 2 primary populations: students who are potentially eligible for VR, meaning that they haven't applied for the full VR program, but they're potentially eligible. And they are served by VRS Pre-ETS representatives. In order to be potentially eligible, there's 3 things that we have to validate. They need to be in school. So that can either be in high school or a post-secondary program that is leading towards a recognized credential. Number 2, they need to be between the ages of 14 and 21. And number 3, we just have to have documentation that they have a disability. We don't even need to know what that disability is. It's not like our full VR program where we gather a lot of information about a person's disability. We just get verification that there is documentation of a disability. So that's how a person can be potentially eligible for VR. And then the second population of students, we don't want to forget that we also provide Pre-ETS to students that are eligible for our regular VR program. And those students are served by a VRS counselor. Contract definitions, we kind of already talked about that, so I'm not going to say much more. We're just really excited that now the rates have been made easier. So we have that $75 an hour rate for one-on-one services and the group rate for $30 an hour for groups of students. Here's another piece that's new that we are implementing for those of you getting this information today. It will be starting today. Also meant to make things easier for everybody. So when it comes to Pre-ETS authorizations, we are asking VRS staff to have one of these 4 end dates on the authorization. So, and it's on a quarterly basis. So it's March 31st, June 30th, September 30th, or December 31st. And the reason being is that we know, we've heard from our providers that when you are providing, quite a few Pre-ETS services, especially to groups of students, it can be really hard to keep track of all those authorizations. And so to have these end dates makes it easier for everyone to know that we need to just be watching those dates. We have an asterisk by March 31st and December 31st because if those dates come and there are still hours left on the authorization, if it's March 31st or December 31st, we can extend the end date on those. But June 30th and September 30th are hard stop dates because June 30th is the end of our state fiscal year and September 30th is the end of our federal fiscal year, and we're not allowed to have authorizations go past those dates. So we already had to have those end dates anyway for authorizations. So now we're just adding 2 other dates throughout the year where we're asking, you know, other options for those end dates. Number 4 on here, or excuse me, number 2 says it can be any start date, but always use one of those 4 end dates. And then number 3, start right away with this. And number 4, just keep in mind that providers, you all have 90 days from the end date to invoice VRS. I'll also say if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. When I'm presenting, I'm not able to keep up with the chat. So Ann Macklett usually watches all of those so she can stop me, but don't send a chat directly to me because I probably won't see it. So either send it to Ann Macklett or to everyone, and we'll answer those questions as we go. All right, so what we want to review on this slide are all the items that community partners can invoice VRS for in terms of pre-ETS services. So I know it's a lot of words on the screen, but this encompasses all the areas in which you can invoice your time for. So number 1 is the most obvious, is the service time. So when you're providing pre-ETS to students individually or in groups, there's obviously the service time that you can bill to VRS. First meeting time is, again, for our potentially eligible students, because we're not allowed to authorize an intake for potentially eligible students. So if you are having that first meeting with the potentially eligible student, then you can bill for that. Preparation time is defined as any of these items. So it can be preparing or revising lesson plans, preparing content for one-on-one sessions, getting materials for sessions ready, communications or attempted communications with students, parents, or schools to get meetings set or plan for or coordinate services. It could be if you're working with a student on a work experience opportunity, editing resumes or cover letters or other documents related to those work experiences. It can also be employer development time. So any time for when you're calling, emailing, or even visiting when it's not COVID, employers in order to arrange for a work-based learning opportunity. It can also include internet search for job leads. And then last but not least, as Kim talked about earlier, it can be travel time. So it can be a round trip time traveling from your primary work location to where services to a student or group of students is provided. It can include the time for a provider to pick up or drop off a student as well. And this is one other clarification, this note on the bottom, which is also a helpful note for our providers. For pre-ETS only, providers can bill for travel time even when a student doesn't show up for their appointment. So if we heard this loud and clear from many providers, especially our outstate providers that might have to drive an hour or more to get to a school or wherever they're going to be meeting with a student. And as much as you try to make sure the student's going to be there, you're reminding them, sometimes you show up and they're not there. And so we're allowing for you to bill for that travel time. The key is making sure that when those things happen, that you are communicating that with the VRS staff that made the referral to you so that they can follow up on that, and we can all be working together to make sure those things happen as little as possible. Preparation time. There's been a lot of questions related to prep time. And so in terms of billing for that, providers can bill up to 50% of the service time for prep time. And I know that's hard to understand. So this example will help you wrap your head around it. So let's say that you're going to be providing a job exploration counseling session that's going to last an hour. you as the provider then can invoice up to 30 minutes for prep time for that session. So again, that's 50% of the service time in order to bill for prep time. Hopefully that makes sense. What community partners are not able to bill for? Pretty basic: time writing reports and preparing invoices. So there are a lot of things that you can bill for when it comes to pre-employment transition services. So I have an example on here to kind of bring all of these concepts together. Pathways is the name of a fictional CRP provider that I'm going to be using throughout this training. So Pathways is the provider that will be assisting a student with looking for an intermediate work experience or job. We're going to talk more about intermediate work experiences in a little bit. So they are helping a student with that to help them find where an employer is going to
pause 1 minute to make sure we have everybody on the new interpreter. Thanks.
Okay. So Pathways and VRS decided that VRS will authorize for 20 hours of pre-ETS work-based learning work experience services at $75 an hour for 20 hours equals $1,500. And this is like the first authorization that was decided. This authorization includes time for the first meeting, the services that will be provided, the prep time, the employer development, and travel time. So it's all under that one line on the authorization. When you invoice, it's all on that one line. In your report, you would just say how much of that time was spent providing the services, how much was the prep time, how much was travel time, etc. Okay, so getting into work-based learning a little bit more. So this visual has already been explained, but it's just looking at it a different way. So when we are looking at pre-ETS work-based learning, there's now 3 service titles that are going to be on contracts for pre-ETS. So you have those introductory work activities, which again are those 5 items listed there: career mentorship, informational interview, job shadow, service learning, or workplace tour field trip. And then you have work experience services and work experience wages. Those last 2 are what we're going to talk about next. There are 3 types of work experiences that we would be referring a student for. The first is to ask a provider to assist a student with finding an intermediate job. So an intermediate job, we use that term because that's as opposed to a final job. And a final job in our world of VRS is that job that an individual is going to keep long-term and we're going to close their VRS case file successfully on. So an intermediate job is not that final job. It's a job while they're in school. It might be their first job. It may not be their first job, but it's a stepping stone position on their way to getting that final job. And in an intermediate job, it looks just like any other regular job because it's competitive integrated employment where an employer is paying their wages. So VRS staff can either authorize up to 30 hours for a provider to assist a student to find an intermediate job. So it includes all the things that were on the slide earlier. And then the service portion includes job searching, orienting that student to that job, and then following up with that student. Now, there is also the opportunity for VRS to refer a student to a provider to help them with a short-term work experience. So if it's a short-term experience where the site is not developed, you as a provider don't have a relationship with a business where the student would like to have a short-term work experience, and VRS doesn't have that relationship yet either, then the VRS staff can authorize up to 20 hours for a provider to assist the student with developing a site and then orienting that student to that site and following up with them. And then in those cases, the provider would also pay the wages. So that's when we'd authorize for work experience wages alongside with that work experience. There also can be when we call it a set site. So if you already have an employer that's able to take on that student for that work experience, we don't need to develop that site, then VRS can authorize up to 10 hours to the provider to help orient that student to that site and then follow up with them. And again, then the provider would be paying the wages under work experience wages. I know there's been questions about, okay, when would we authorize for work experience services versus a PBA? So to be clear, the work experience services is when it's a short-term work experience or that intermediate job. And then the final job, if a provider is helping a student with that, then it would be a PBA. So sometimes a student can be in high school and it's their last few months of high school. And we know, or the plan is anyway, for that student to be looking for that final job. So they might still be in high school, but they're going to look for that final job. So then we would authorize for a PBA. It's not a work experience at that point. And then there was another question about, okay, now that we're adding work experience services onto contracts as a regular VR service, why wouldn't we just authorize for a PBA? Well, if it really truly is for a work experience and you've already started the work on helping that student to obtain the work experience, it doesn't make sense to start over with a PBA. You know, oftentimes you've already begun, and then, you know, the whole thing with milestones, it gets kind of complicated. Also, if it's a short-term work experience and you're going to be developing that site and then following up with that student, we don't have a way that PBA wouldn't fit for that anyway. So it's nice to have this as a regular VR service so we can still provide or continue providing work experiences to young people. We're going to take a break in a little bit here. So the coaching services for students who are eligible for VR only. So again, we can't unfortunately provide any sort of coaching, the work-based learning coaching to students who are potentially eligible. If those students, it appears that they're going to need that service and they can't get it anywhere else, they would need to apply for regular VR services. So if it's a work experience, then we can authorize for work-based learning coaching using Pre-ETS funds. If it's for a final job, then we authorize for job coaching under regular VR funds. Now, there's a lot of questions about the 120 hours for a short-term work experience. 120 hours is just a suggested time frame. It's not a required time frame. So those short-term work experiences can be less than 120 hours or they can be more. It really depends on the needs of the student. It just wouldn't be something that's ongoing for months and months. Like it wouldn't be the whole school year, for instance. So for students that are looking for something more long-term, then we would want to consider whether we should be helping them find a job, you know, an intermediate job where an employer is going to pay their wages. And lastly, there's no need for RAM approval if a work experience that's a short-term work experience goes beyond 120 hours. VRS representatives and counselors can just authorize for beyond that 120 hours if that's where you're going with it. Okay, I'm just gonna, actually what I think I'm gonna do is take a break right now. We're at 2:04. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back and then we'll review all of this in our flow chart that we have that helps you wrap your head around all this too. So let's come back together at 2:15 and we'll pick up where we left off. we'll get back to the presentation. No, I don't think I'm sharing though, am I? Sorry. Okay. So wanted to review with you a flow chart that we put together. I want to note that what I'm going to show is unfortunately it's inaccessible when we have it in to view as a flow chart on a, but then we have an accessible version that has all the exact same information. It's the second link on this slide, and so it has all the information that's on the flow chart. It's just in written table format. So I'm going to show the flow chart version here. Excuse me. It's a little awkward when you're trying to show things on Zoom because you have all these boxes on here. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Just give me a sec. Okay. All right, so here is that flow chart. So this helps VRS staff understand, how to authorize. It also helps our community partners understand the process as well with authorizing and invoicing. So we start at the top. What type of work experience is VRS referring a student for? So if it's an intermediate job where an employer is going to be paying the wages, you start on the left side of the page. If it's going to be a short-term experience where you as a provider will be paying their wages, then we go down the column on the right-hand side. So let's just go through the intermediate job. If the student is potentially eligible for VR, the Pre-ETS representative will authorize for 1 to 2 hours as Pre-ETS work-based learning, work experience services at $75 an hour for that first meeting. They will also complete all 3 pages of the Pre-ETS referral form. So we have a different referral form for potentially eligible students because the information we have about potentially eligible students is different. We have less information about those students. And so it also helps make it clear when you're getting the referral when it's a potentially eligible student. If the student is eligible for VR, the VR counselor will authorize for an intake fee, whatever that fee is on your contract. Pretty soon when your contract is amended, you'll have a Pre-ETS intake fee on there. And then that counselor would be completing the invitation to placement form. So we will do that for all eligible students who are being referred for a work experience. Then the intake or that first meeting takes place. And when it's an intermediate job, we ask that the placement plan be written. And on the placement plan, there's a place to check off that this is a placement plan for a work experience. And then from there, VRS staff can authorize up to 30 hours as Pre-ETS work-based learning, work experience services at $75 an hour. It includes any of the following: helping the student to find a job, helping the student to orient to the job, and following up with the student and the employer. We have a reminder that billable time can also include phone calls or emails with the student or the student's team or the employer. And it can go beyond the 30 hours, but in this case, it would need RAM approval. So the VRS Pre-ETS representative or counselor would need to get their RAM's approval for going beyond 30 hours. And if the student is eligible for VR and they need coaching, then the the counselor could authorize Pre-ETS services in support of Pre-ETS work-based learning coaching. Now we'll go back to the top. If it's a short-term work experience where a provider will be paying the student's wage. If a student's potentially eligible for VR, again, 1 to 2 hours can be authorized for that first meeting, and all 3 pages of the Pre-ETS referral form would be completed. If they're eligible, the invitation to placement will be completed. That intake or first meeting would take place. And then we go here, if the site's already developed, we can authorize up to 10 hours as Pre-ETS work-based learning work experience services at $75 an hour. And that would include orienting the student to the work experience and following up with the student and the employer. Again, the billable time can include phone calls and emails, etc. And it can go beyond 10 hours with RAM approval. If the provider will be developing the site, then we can authorize up to 20 hours, which would include developing the site and then orienting and following up. The last thing we have on here is a reminder to authorize for work-based learning work experience wages at the prevailing wage, plus right now it's 25% administrative costs. Once your contract is amended, we will be going up to 50%. So we have to be watching for those contracts to be amended. Number of hours can be more or less than 120 hours. Again, no RAM approval needed for the number of hours that the work experience will be. And if the student's eligible for VR, we can authorize for coaching as well as needed. So hopefully that also can help you with remembering the process for supporting work experiences. Okay. So estimating time for authorizations. So if it's less than a full hour, you can go as low as the quarter hour for authorizations and for invoices. Of course, VRS and our partners need to work together to estimate the number of hours necessary to complete the services. A few more words about estimating travel time for authorizations. Again, we want to work together on that. Oftentimes the best way of figuring out what the travel time will be would be using like a mapping service like Google Maps to determine the most direct and efficient route. Of course, you want to also remember to take into account delays such as weather and rush hour traffic, so have some cushion in there. Transportation time may be authorized from the community partner staff's primary work location. However, when the community partner staff does not start from the primary work location, the allowable transportation time is either A, the time from the community partner staff residence to the appointment, or B, from the primary work location to the appointment, whichever is less. So let's go into some examples of some students related to work experience services. So our first example is Stephen. He is needing assistance to find an intermediate job. He's a senior in high school. He's never had a job. He wants to get a job where an employer is going to pay his wages and would like to do stocking at a retail store. And he, like all the examples, is going to be working with a provider named Pathways. So this shows you what the authorization or authorizations could be. And I say it's either, depending on, sometimes we might just authorize for that first meeting and then authorize for the second chunk of hours, or staff might authorize it all together. That always just depends on how things are getting set up and, the discussions that are had between VRS and the provider. But we would authorize 1 to 2 hours for a first meeting under work experience services if Stephen was potentially eligible, or it would be a Pre-ETS intake if he's eligible. And then in this case, because it's looking for that intermediate job, we'd authorize up to 30 hours at $75 an hour. The type on the contract is Pre-ETS work-based learning. The actual title is work experience services. And it can include time for job search, orienting to the job and following up, any prep time, any employer development, and travel time. The second example is Sadie. She's a junior in high school, and her long-term goal is to be an auto mechanic. She'd like to have a short-term experience where the provider is going to be paying her wages at an auto shop over the summer because she wants to see what that environment is like. She will also be working with Pathways. So in this case, again, 1 to 2 hours for a first meeting or a pre-ETS intake would be authorized. And then it would be up to 20 hours at $75 an hour under that title of work experience services. And that can include time to develop that site for her, help her orient to that site, and then follow up. It can also include prep time, the employer development, and travel. One other piece that we can't forget is that since Pathways will be paying Sadie's wages, we have to have an authorization for that. So in this case, the wage for entry-level shop helpers at the place that she's going to be doing her work experience is $11 an hour. So Pathways will make an authorization to Pathways for 11 plus 25% for the admin costs, soon to be 50% when contracts are amended. So with the 25%, that'd be $13.75 an hour times 80 hours that she's going to be working for this month equals $1,100. Our last example is Hua. She is looking for a short-term site, and the site's already developed. So she's a 10th grader. She dreams of becoming a chef. Pathways already has a relationship with a nearby restaurant that allows students to try out jobs there. She's going to participate in a 120-hour experience where she'll do prep work in the kitchen. So once again, 1 to 2 hours for the first meeting would be authorized, and then the intake fee if she's an eligible student. Up to 10 hours at $75 an hour would be authorized under work experience services to help orient her to the work experience. Any prep time, employer development, or travel, got a little cut off there. And then also work experience wages. So in this case, it's $10 an hour plus the 25% admin fee, soon to be 50%. $12.50 an hour times 120 hours is $1,500. So are there any questions about any of that? I'm missing a slide. Oh, here. So one other thing to help all of you is we've created an invoice and report checklist. I'll review that with you. This was sent out to everybody with the email, with the PowerPoint and everything else you got for today's meeting. So this is a checklist that could be used actually for any of the VRS services, not just pre-ETS. And it's for community partners. It helps you with doing a kind of a quality assurance before sending over a report and invoice to VRS. And it can also be helpful for VRS staff to help make sure we have everything we need in order to pass along an invoice to be paid. So first thing on here, is there a report and invoice that are being submitted together? We have a note here that we have some of our pre-ETS providers that have access to Workforce One, and then they submit the report directly into case notes. So that's the only time they wouldn't be physically submitted together, but you'd want them still done at the same time. And a reminder for those that are putting case notes into Workforce One, as a provider, you should be selecting the pre-ETS vendor reports when you're submitting a pre-ETS report into Workforce One. The second box is the service or services identified on the invoice and the report, and do they match? And does this also match the services that are on the authorization? Next, is there sufficient detail to account for services outlined within the report? And we also have a note on this one that when it's work experience wages, we need to account for the number of hours the student worked each day. And oftentimes the best way or easiest way to do that is sending a copy of the student's timesheet. But if you don't have easy access to that, just listing that out in the report is fine as well. Do the dates and hours on the report and invoice match? And do these dates and hours fall within the dates on the authorization? Are the correct rates indicated on the invoice and do they match the report? We want to make sure we're considering Pre-ETS individual versus group rates. Of course, do the costs add up correctly on the invoice? Is the correct authorization number indicated on the invoice? And is there just one authorization number on the invoice? And last but not least, is there a unique invoice number on the invoice? So we created this because there's been a lot of questions about, getting invoices and reports in and things getting sent back. So hopefully this will help everybody with that process, at least a bit anyway. Okay. Any questions that I'm missing? All right. I don't think that Chris McVeigh is back on the line. I know she had to attend a meeting with DHS. What we're going to do next is take some time to have some local conversations. So this is, to me, probably the most exciting part of the day, where we're going to have some breakout sessions with our partners and the VRS team that they selected to have conversations with. A few days ago, I sent out these questions to our RAMs and our placement staff, and they were going to talk about who was going to facilitate these discussions and then who was going to take notes. Just a few words before going into these breakout sessions. Obviously, I mean, as has been the theme of discussion all day today, we know that Pre-ETS is still such a new thing for everybody, especially with our community partners. So that is a key reason why we're having these discussions, because especially going into this year with COVID, we want to understand from you on the VRS side, understand from our community partners what you have available and what you are able to provide. We also want to know what challenges you're faced with and what we can do to support you as community partners. We'd also like for our VRS staff to share with our partners, what do you know about the students in the schools that you serve? And what are you seeing as typical needs that you would like our community partners to help provide? And then lastly, the business engagement networks we see as a key way for the partnerships to happen. So we wanted you to have some discussions about, how that partnership through the BENS can work. And, if there's anything more that we can be considering together to help improve that partnership with the BENS. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to, I'm going to hand it over to Ann Macklett, who's going to help us get into breakout rooms, and she'll give a few pointers. And then before we send you off, we'll talk about how much time we'll be spending on this discussion time.
Okay, everybody. Yes, we wanted to talk this through because I know if this is the first time you're doing it, we want to make sure to just reference what your experience will be. So a couple of things. We do have some people still unidentified in breakout rooms. I've been trying to privately chat with some of you, and that's okay. Just know for those that might not yet be assigned to a breakout room, we have probably maybe 10 or less. You will stay in our main room where you're at now, and we'll be able to have a dialogue with you and get you assigned. If you could just be patient then about going one at a time, then we'll get you there, because we'll have a long, good discussion in those breakout rooms. So hopefully you won't miss too much at the front end and you'll be able to catch up with groups. But we will do a couple of things. You're gonna, again, you're going to get a notification that says join the breakout room. In order for you to go from your main room where you are now to the breakout room, you have to click on that button. So make sure you do that. There is a period of time at which that notice stays open on your screen, and then it goes away. So don't panic, we're still here. The breakout room is still an option. You'll actually end up going down to your toolbar when you move your, well, in this view, if you go up to your, the top of the screen with your cursor, there's a little bit of a more button. And in there, you don't see it now because we haven't activated breakouts, but you will have the ability to click on that 3 more button and then be able to join that breakout session, even though that notice goes away. So just know that that's going to be the case. If you get in the room and say, oh, I didn't mean to be with this group, and hopefully we don't have a lot of those that you feel that that's the case, but just leave the room, come back in the main session when we can get you to the right room. That's the other thing. There is, let's see, what else do I want to mention? There is one other thing I would mention to you. Well, 2 other things. You will get a notification from us. We like to do it like about 5 minutes before you're wrapping up. So you know there's 5 minutes left in your discussion, so you can kind of time all of the rest of your discussion and then come back to the group. You'll get a 60-second reminder too just before coming back to the main room. So that'll allow you to complete everything as much as possible. And we will be trying to put some of the things in the chat that you need to discuss, but your RAMs will have all those questions as well. The last thing I do need to do though, is we have, not a lot, but we have 2 people who have called in, and we want to make sure to identify who those people are. So I'm just going to call out, there's a 651 number, 999-8200. If you could in the chat just let me know who that is and we can rename you, because you basically want to get your body in with your audio so you both are there. So that's the other thing. And then there's a 763-229-3701. So you can either put in the chat, if we can see those, or you can actually rename yourself if you know how to do that too. You basically go up to the participant tab, click on more, and then rename yourself by doing it that way as well. So I could either rename you or you could, and there might even be one more. I think there's a 651-289-3177. So if you experience for some reason that your audio is not there, if we don't get you renamed before you go in, just come on back to the main room and we'll try to pair those up and make sure they're both in the same room. Alyssa.
Okay.
Hand it over to you.
Hand it over to me. Well, what we'll do is we want to just go around to each group and just get a short recap of your discussion so you don't have to answer or give us a report out on each question. So if you can just give like a highlight how the discussion went and if there's any unanswered questions that you would like us to address, you can report that as well. So I'm just going to go backwards from what we did this morning when we had just our VRS staff. And I'd like to start with the Burnsville Shakopee team, which would be Heather Felderman as the RAM, but you can let us know if there's someone else that will be doing a report out on your discussion.
It'll probably be me. I led the discussion. So kind of an overview. We have some new providers that have not done pre-ETS before. So we kind of just talked, how can we support them? How can they support us? Just kind of a learn as we go with this new environment. So we said it's going to be a work in progress, especially the first month, to kind of figure out needs, but they are willing to kind of jump right in and work for our students and work with us. So we're excited to have them on board.
That's fabulous. That in and of itself, it makes the discussion so important, because when you're new to this and be able to talk with the VRS staff about what they see as needs, that's awesome. So I'm glad that you were able to have that discussion. Okay. let's move on to the Woodbury team with Erin Compa as the RAM there.
Great. We had a good discussion. We talked a lot about just the vendors, the changes with their services with COVID, and kind of brainstorming what that might look like moving forward. We also had a few people in the group that hadn't been involved in our business engagement networks previously. So a lot of our conversation was just talking about what those meetings are, how we can add value to those meetings. And that was a lot of the conversation, as well as just what employers are hiring. That was good as well. So if anybody else in our group wants to jump in, feel free. Oh, thank you.
Alyssa, we have a special request for the Blaine team to go next, and Sarah Wolf.
All right, go for it, Sarah.
My daughter got her first job at McDonald's, so she has to be to work at 4. So she's 14.
We support work. Woohoo.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, can I go first? We talked about just in general that we're always looking for work experience. And the one that came up that I thought was interesting that we're starting to hear more and more of is just that post-secondary supports on helping individuals be successful transitioning to college. With our providers, we talked about who's providing virtual services exclusively, and then those who are providing one-on-one in-person services, because job coaching seems to be a high demand, especially for the younger folks, because those seem to be the ones who are getting jobs and want to work right now. We did a quick recap of what business engagement networks are and the benefits of being in a group and helping be the bridge between schools, counselors, CRPs. And then we talked a little bit about technology, just how that can be great for some folks, and then other folks it can be a struggle, and how to connect with businesses. And then actually we didn't have any questions.
Good. Well, thank you, Sarah. Again, it is so nice to be able to talk about the Bends for those that aren't engaged with them yet, and for you all to get engaged if that's of interest to you. It's a great place to be sharing information about pre-ETS as well as services to adults. I know there was a question, Kim Babine, are you on and able to answer a question? There's a question about when contracts will be amended. I know you're in the process of processing all of those. I don't know if you just want to say a word about that.
Here, I'm sorry, I shut my laptop so I could use my bigger monitor. I'm sorry, I'm here. Hi, everybody. So people have been submitting their amendments here in the last couple of weeks. Some people got them in maybe even a month ago, and so we were waiting for a few of them to come in. It's helpful to see, like that's kind of how the group rates came about, or other things like that. Like we see things that are an issue, and we kind of pivot and are able to react to those things. So we didn't want to get those out the door and just send them through, because we wanted to be able to react to any other themes that we were seeing. And so we're moving on those now. And then it just takes a little while to get them done. So it takes a little while once they come in for the program for Anne and Sarah and me to do our review. We bring it to VRS leadership, and then if we've okayed everything, then it can go pretty quickly. If you're asking for big rate increases, or if you are, if there's mostly big rate increases are the things that we have to really kind of parse out and go back and forth and get more information from you and kind of negotiate. So if you come in at without big rate increases, yours will move pretty quickly. If we have to negotiate with you, it'll hold up the process. It just is. Note that we have 60 of you providers have contracts, periods on your contracts right now, and we expect other people to add, providers to add pre-ETS to their PT contracts. And so that's like 75 amendments that we think we might have. And there's one me, and there's one Ann, and there's one Sarah. And that's just, it's a lot of volume. So it's going to take a little while for us to get through them all. Once they get through, once we've agreed on things, we kind of bring it to leadership. We've done our negotiation. Then it's several weeks to get it through the process. So then it goes to deed fiscal. It goes to back to you for signature. It's our director's signature, and then it has to go back through deed fiscal and then up to the Department of Administration, Minnesota Department of Administration, Office of State Procurement, where they're at any of those steps with deed fiscal or Office of State Procurement, there might be some back and forth as well. So we're working on them. If yours is already in, we're working on it right now, and we'll kind of keep you posted on it as best we can, but it'll take at least a month to get them through once we get them in. It's usually 2.
Thanks, Kim. I know there's another question about the business engagement networks and how you can get connected to those. And Maureen McAvoy said you can chat with her either in the chat. You can email Maureen. If you have her email, you can email us as well, and we'll help you get connected. If you're not connected to a business engagement network, we'll help you get engaged with those. Okay, so let's keep going here. Let's go to the Apple Valley team, Rich Wagner's team, and who's going to do the report out there?
It looks like I'm going to go ahead and do it, Melissa. Rich Wagner. And, I think we had a really nice discussion, had several people join us from outstate as well. And we're just, I think, one thing, just acknowledging just the change of the landscape with moving into these virtual services, and then trying to be creative and thinking, well, okay, now how do we respond? How do we partner with the school? What information is the school going to, what would be useful for the school? What information the providers need to know so they can kind of put a package together that would be useful to the school? How do we introduce some of those ideas to the schools for them to kind of explore and to try to utilize and plan for? So, it's just, I'm not sure what that roadmap is, but we're, I think, trying to think of how we could maybe pitch some things to some of the schools and see if maybe we could get some things, maybe not in September, but going on into the fall or into the rest of the school year, plant some seeds and see if we can't work with our partners to put some things together. A couple areas we talked about: advocacy, work-based learning, which is kind of an interesting package, and then the challenges about engaging with individuals to make a virtual type of thing successful. The question we had is, of all those, what are the rest of the great ideas and great services providers are doing statewide? We'd like to know more about what you're doing so that we can maybe explore some of those ideas locally.
Thank you. Hopefully we can start to figure out ways to be able to share statewide like that. I'll just give a little plug. I know the MRA, Minnesota Rehabilitation Association, is going to be hosting an event this fall in October related to Pre-ETS. If you haven't seen the information, they're looking for presenters of our providers that are providing Pre-ETS, and then we'll be hearing from those providers on different ways they're delivering Pre-ETS. So that will be one way, and we'll want to keep these sort of conversations going too. Thank you, Rich. How about we go to Elise Knopf with the Deaf Hard of Hearing Unit?
Hi, this is Sarah Murphy, and I was asked to report out for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing team.
Great, thanks, Sarah.
Yep. So we talked about quite a bit, and Ron promised to jump in if I miss anything big. So thanks for that, Ron. We talked a lot about the services that we would like to see provided, especially ILS services, things like, helping students who are suddenly finding out that they need to apply for medical assistance or for Social Security, and really helping them out so they start off as an adult on the right footing. And there were a lot of different services that the team brought up that would kind of fit into that category, including things like, you know, getting ready for a driver's ed test and practicing driving too. We also talked about work experience and how important that is, and how useful it would be to have a list of what providers are providing, what kind of you know, sites, as far as set sites that provide those work experiences, so that counselors can easily reference and go through that list to figure out where a student can go to get that kind of service. And
oh yeah, I was just going to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just adding more to it. You know, some of the independent living skills, you know, that's a high need, just a huge variety. And, you know, some of the challenges that we see later, you know, when people are adults, they're, you know, the youth can be addressing these early on. So those are some of the services. An example was like someone who gets overpayment on Social Security. Well, they can learn that when they're younger. That's not going to happen. Yeah, and then just you know, trying to do as much remote work as possible, but yet, you know, the advantages of, you know, being at a work site, you know, that's hard to replace. So what are some creative ideas to do that, such as, you know, virtual tours and just more with the employers and other ideas.
Great. Thanks, Sarah and Ron. All right. How about we go to Don LaRue Whitwer with the other St. Paul staff?
Hi, this is Dawn Muller. I am reporting out for our team. So first of all, I just want to give a big shout out to Tammy, who was the CRP in our group. Tammy works for MSS, and she's providing all services and in-person services. The thing she was most excited about from this summer was the group that she did, which was mostly workplace readiness, where they used eTrack and they used virtual job shadow and just got some students ready for work. So that's very cool. It was a 6-week course that she did this summer. The thing that I think stands out from our group was that we talked about how we need more entry-level job sites. Similar to Home Depot, but in St. Paul, there's no Home Depot. So something in the actual city of St. Paul that is easy for students to get to for, you know, those entry-level work experiences. And the other thing we saw as a need is for someone to develop a cashier training program that includes customer service. So we think that a lot of students are really afraid of food service work or cash or retail work because they're afraid, because everybody has to cashier now. And is it possible to restart what Goodwill used to do and what some other providers used to do with actually doing that specific customer service cashier training, just really focused on that to just build confidence and skills. I think that was everything that stood out.
Thank you, Don. Perfect. How about we move to the North St. Paul team? Who's going to be reporting out there?
I'm going to be reporting out, Alyssa.
All right. Thanks, Kayla.
Yep. So we had a good mix with providers of people who were new to Pre-ETS, were just getting it on their contracts this year, and people who have been providing it for a while. We had Andrea from Goodwill, who was part of one of the grants a few years ago. So she was able to provide some wisdom as far as Pre-ETS services for people who are newer to it. And then we had some needs that we had identified were more work experiences, and specifically short-term ones. Just right now, and in the past few years, we've had difficulty finding work experiences that are short-term for the individuals we work with, especially if they need ongoing supports, not just a couple follow-ups or a couple touch bases with the provider. Yeah, that's pretty much what stood out. We did discuss a little bit about maybe some work from home options, if there was somebody or that knew of any work from home options, because that seems to be a good hot topic right now.
Beautiful. I definitely hear a theme about the need for work experiences and having different options for that.
Before we go on, can we just switch the interpreters a minute?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks, Kayla. Let's move to Sarah Gutzman's team, Hennepin South, Bloomington, Chaska.
Yes, I am going to present, I guess. So we said just things are going to be different, going to be Zoom. We talked about the need for job shadows, informational interviews, that kind of thing in the kind of the industries in demand, or the things that outside of the stuff that we're typically doing for students, but thinking of like welders, the construction industry, manufacturing, how we can get the students the information outside of MCIS. Nancy shared a story about how a business did a video of the business and showed the jobs that are in there, and then sent it to the Career Force Center, and then they were able to show people what kind of jobs they were hiring and what the business would look like, or at least being able to talk to the industry. So we talked about that. We talked about what staff could do things. We talked a lot about the bends and how to use the bends more, and what is working, what's not working. We've been really impressed with what our bend in our area, the speakers that they've had come in, and how helpful it's been for staff as well as providers. And that also we've had numerous work coordinators attending, and we thought they should probably be able to attend more now, since many of our schools will be doing virtually. They won't have to leave school to attend. Let's see. See if we talked about, you know, job coaching, work experiences are going to be the needs that we need. One of the things that we talked about is maybe how do we do job fairs, doing virtual job fairs or a virtual business of the day, because now that it's going to be pretty hard to do job fairs in person. So how do we maybe do one virtually? Then the other thing we talked about is the industries that are kind of hard to get into right now, such as childcare, daycare, healthcare. We know that there's a demand, but we're probably not going to be able to get our students temporary work experience or a situational job shadow or whatever in those industries because of the restrictions to those employers. But then also just talking about how do we meet with students. You know, the students that want our services, they're going to stay engaged, but those students says maybe that it takes a while to build that relationship, and we were able to build the relationships by going to the school regularly. We won't have that necessarily, and maybe we won't have case managers to help with that. So how do we get to those kids? And we did talk a little bit about Coursera, through the free college classes through the Career Force Center, and how we could use that for some students to get a specific training to be maybe more marketable. I'm trying to think, did I miss anything else, group? I think that's it.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. Let's move to the Minneapolis North and South teens. I think, Stephanie, you got voluntold again.
Yes, yes, ma'am. It's all good. I'm aware. No, it's fine. So we talked a lot about like the services, just like everybody else did, but I think the thing that was most stand out for us was just we're really going to have to, like VR staff and our CRPs, we're going to have to really work together, just because I think there's a lot of people that the pre-ETS services are new. And so trying to figure out how to provide those, and then in this virtual world / in-person world, depending on what the schools are doing, I think we just have to be very supportive of each other. And then, so we got a lot of good information from each of our providers that were in our group about what they're doing and what they're able to provide for services. So it's kind of a mixed bag and case-by-case basis from the sounds of it. And I think the biggest question that we had is we talked a lot about the CTIC meetings at the end, and if they're happening in who's running those in our metro area.
Great. Were you able to answer that question about CTICs, or are you still wondering?
So I wasn't able to because I wasn't part of it the last time, and I think Cheryl Dellery was previously. So question tossed out there. Does anybody know?
Well, I'll tell you what, a number of weeks ago, I sent out an email to all VRS transition staff and asked them to let me know about CTICs that are active. And I have a list of all the responses that I got. I did find that most of the Metro CTICs are still active. So if you need to be connected, I had asked who the contact person is. You can certainly email me. I'm working with Lindsay Horowitz, the transition specialist at MDE, and we would like to have more coordination at the state level with the CTICs. So more to come on that. But in the meantime, certainly email me if you're looking for a contact for a CTIC. Thank you. Let's move to Connie Schultz's team out of Brooklyn Park.
Oh, I took the notes, so I'll kind of sum it up. My writing is bad again, but we talked to a couple providers, and it was really a good talk. The service that came up the most was job coaching. I'm going to type this up for you, Alyssa, and get it to you because there's a whole bunch of other stuff too. I won't go into it. Time's getting short here. We talked about either in-person job coaching or virtual. Virtual services were available and going well. Let's see. We talked about the BENS and how they could join, or partners could join and expand resources and collect that with their colleagues. And employers do attend our BENS once in a while, so that might be an engagement for employers. Number 4, what was number 4 here? The virtual, well, all of the career forces have virtual job events, and so does the county. And I'm not aware of this one, but Frank brought up a Connect Disability in Minnesota. I don't know if I wrote that down right or not, but they have job fairs too, so virtually. And we did have one question, and it was are there trainings for needs-based learning? So, and then we kind of said we'll make it a point to kind of invite more our community partners to team meetings too, now that we're kind of doing this virtually. So I'll get this to you.
Thanks. Yeah, if everybody could send me their notes, I am doing a summary from all the meetings that we've had. It will be helpful for everybody to kind of know some of the big questions out there and topics of discussion. And maybe, well, I want to get us done here by 4 o'clock. So I know you had a particular question. I'm going to have to follow up with you on that, Connie, because I need more clarification. But love the idea of having, more of your providers come to team meetings. Again, a common theme today was the business engagement networks. I mean, I think that really is the place to go as well, to be collaborating together. Again, as was discussed, we're trying to bring in work-based learning coordinators to those bends, as well as employers. So it's really a great place to coordinate services. I had something else I was going to say, but I lost it. But I think I got through all the teams. Did I miss somebody? I don't think I did. Well, I think, now is Chris McVeigh on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I don't know if you had a few words that you wanted to say in closing.
No, just to thank everyone for their time today. I know that for our VRS staff, it's been a long day, but I hope that you're leaving feeling full of information about Pre-ETS, that very important information we needed to download to you in the morning, but also prepared and feeling ready to engage with students in this weird COVID time where so much of our work, and all of our work at this point, is virtual. I also want to thank our community partners for joining us in the afternoon. And I think that when we have an opportunity to convene both VRS staff and community partners and talk about, the services that are available and connecting them to students in need of those services, this is where the rubber is going to meet the road, and we really have the opportunity to move the dial on helping young people with disabilities prepare for and to dream and to think about what they want to do for their employment futures. And so I'm hoping and believing, Alyssa and I in our conversations, as well as other VRS staff, in planning for future meetings where we can convene just like this. And certainly 3 months from now, next quarter, our VRS staff are going to have a much better sense of the ability to access students and to provide Pre-ETS services, services to groups, services to individuals, much of that available virtually. But I really look forward to the next time that we can convene again and just have that local conversation. So again, thank you for today, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. And I know Anne has an evaluation. You put it in the chat, but I think you'll also send it out to people.
Yes, I will be. I'll sending it in an email as well. But you can always click on it if you want to do it right now and get it off your list. Please do, because we'd love to get your feedback. So thank you for your engagement and discussion today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.